He had, but had been too shy to say so. "Jasper and me on board the Oriana. We adore it. Do you paint?" "Luckily, I don't even try." "A policeman, perhaps?" "Not even that, I'm afraid. An unnatural son." "Selina, darling, one more face like that, and out you go before the pudding, which is strawberries and cream." Her sister, Julietta, was consumed with laughter. "Aren't children awful?" "It won't last," Rickie assured her. Julia gave him a look of radiant approval. He was uplifted. That is an upsetting lady, thought Rickie. A very lovely and upsetting lady. The fishing village of Deep Cove was on the north coast of the island, with Mr. and Mrs. Ferrand's stone cottage being on the waterfront. Rickie had an upstairs front bedroom and the use of a suffocating parlour. He preferred to work in his bedroom. When he came into the passage, he heard the thump of Mrs. Ferrand's iron in the kitchen and caught the smell of hot cloth. She came out, a handsome, dark woman of about 35, with black hair drawn into a knot. "You're back, then? Do you fancy a cup of tea?" "No, thank you very much. I had an awfully late luncheon." "Up above, at l'Espérance?" "That's right." "And they would all be there? All the family?" "Well, I think so." "Would that be all the company?" "There was another visitor." Rickie began to walk down the passage. "Who might that have been, then?" "A Miss Harkness." "What was she doing there?" "She was lunching," Rickie said very coldly, and ran upstairs 2 steps at a time. He heard her slam the kitchen door. He tried to settle down to work, but was unable to do so. Instead, he thought he would give himself the pleasure of writing a bread-and-butter letter to Julia Fairmont. "Dear Mrs. Fairmont, it was so kind of you to have me, and I did enjoy myself so very much. With many thanks, Rickie. P.S. I do hope your other visitor has settled in nicely." He decided to go out and post his letter, which would also give him the chance to explore the village properly. There wasn't a great deal to explore. The one shop there was, Mercer's Drapery and General Suppliers, combined the functions of post office, grocery, hardware, clothing, stationery, and toy shops. He turned in at the door and sustained a sharp jab below the ribs. He swung round, to find himself face to face with a wild luxuriance of hair, dark spectacles, a floral shirt, beads, and fringes. "What's that for?" "I was turning round, wasn't I?" a voice mumbled. Its owner lurched past Rickie and slouched off down the street, a paint-box swinging from his shoulder. "Very careless that was," said Mr. Mercer, the solitary shopman, emerging from the shadows. "Can I interest you in anything?" Rickie, though still in pain, could be interested in a dark blue polo-neck sweater that carried a label, "Hand-knitted locally, very special offer." "Beautiful piece of work, sir. Mrs. Ferrand is in a class by herself." "Mrs. Ferrand?" "Quite so, sir. Would you care to try?" Rickie did try, and not only bought the sweater, but also a short blue coat of a nautical cut that went very well with it. He walked along the main street, which stopped abruptly at a flight of steps leading down to the Strand. At the foot of these steps, with an easel set up before him, a pallet on his arm and his paint-box open at his feet, stood the man he had encountered in the shop. "Hello again. I hope you don't mind my looking on for a moment." There was movement in the beard and whiskers, and a dull sound. "Could I have seen some of your things up at l'Espérance, the Farriman's house?" "I sold a few things to some woman the other day. Talked a load of bulls, of course, they always do. But she wasn't bad, figuratively speaking. Worth the odd grope." Rickie suddenly felt inclined to kick him. "Oh well, I'll be moving on." "What's your hurry?" "I've got some work to do." "Work?" "That's right. Good evening to you." "You write, don't you?" "Try to." Rickie walked on without further comment. On the way back he reflected that it was highly possible every person in the village knew by this time that he lodged with the Ferrands, and tried to write. So he returned to the cottage and tried. Nobody had ever tried to tart up the Cod and Bottle. It was an unadulterated pub. The barman, who, as Rickie was to learn, was called Bob Mestre, was the landlord. He served Rickie